Number 13. Okay. It is a mistake to think, as ecologists once did, that natural selection was eventually results in organisms that will be perfectly adapted to the environment. So it's saying that it's a mistake to think that natural selection is a result of organisms adapting to the environment.
Yeah.
After all, perfect adaptation of an individual to its environment is impossible, for an individual's environment can vary tremendously. No one set of attributes could possibly prepare an organism to cope with all of the conditions that it could face. So it's to say, the last sentence is saying that no individual can perfectly adapt to its environments because the environment is constantly changing. And I think the conclusion is no one set of attributes could possibly prepare an organism to cope with all the conditions that it could face.
Okay, so is this what the author is trying to persuade us of? So is it an opinion that no single set of attributes could possibly prepare organisms to cope with all the conditions it could face?
No, that would be, oh wait, no. So it would be that it's a mistake to think that.
Yes, so we use this to support this up here, right?
Yeah, okay.
It is a mistake to think, as ecologists once did, that natural selection will eventually result in organisms that will be perfectly adapted to their environment because no single set of attributes could possibly prepare them to cope with all the conditions that they could face.
Mhm.
If we do the because test there, it really helps us see that the first sentence is our conclusion. And once we read that first thing, I'm like, well, why is it a mistake, right? When we read critically, it's like, well, why is it a mistake to think this? Like, you don't, like, why do you just get to say that?
Mhm.
But then that's where our two premises come in to support that.
Okay, that makes sense. Then which one of the following most accurately expresses the main conclusion of the argument? It is not possible for an individual to be perfectly adapted to its environment. And then, no. Natural selection will never result in individuals that will be perfectly adapted to their environment. No. No single set of attributes could enable an individual organism to cope with all of the conditions that it might face. Then definitely no for C, because that's just supporting.
Yes.
Because an individual's environment can vary tremendously, no individual can be perfectly adapted to its environment. I like D.
Okay, so what is our conclusion?
Would it be the entire first sentence that is a mistake to think that?
So our thing is, it's a mistake to think that natural selection will eventually result in organisms that will be perfectly adapted to its environment. So it's wrong to think that organisms will be perfectly adapted to their environment.
Oh, so D would be wrong then.
Yeah,
Because
we're not saying it. We're not saying that it doesn't bring in natural selection, and we're not saying it's because an individual's environment can vary tremendously.
Okay, that makes sense then. I feel like I just took the last part where it says no individual can be perfectly adapted to its environment, and went with the last sentence of perfectly adapted to their environment.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be D would be wrong. The ecologists once believed that natural selection would eventually result in individuals that would be perfectly adapted to their environment. I like E.
Okay, but is that what our conclusion is? Are they trying to persuade us that ecologists once believed this?
No.
No, they're saying that it's wrong to believe this. No one's trying to persuade us that people used to believe it.
Okay, so it's wrong. So it would be A then. That's not possible for an individual. Wait, no.
Yeah, no, let me see sorry, you were talking very fast and I was trying to read them.
Sorry.
So let me read these so B is saying that I actually feel like this is a tricky main conclusion question because a couple of these could fit in.
I just felt like B was when I said will never result.
I know that's super strong.
Yeah, so kind of like.
So we're
Yeah.
saying it's a mistake to think that natural selection will eventually result in organisms that will be perfectly adapted. But if we're saying it's wrong to think that they once will happen, then what we're saying here, if we're saying that they will not eventually result, I feel like that's the same as saying will never.
Oh, okay. That's
So
interesting.
A says it is not possible for an individual to be perfectly adapted to its environment. I think A is wrong is because we're not saying it's not possible for them to adapt to our environment. We're saying that natural selection like isn't the reason that it will happen. So like maybe and like what is perfect? I don't know, but like maybe I am perfectly without natural selection. I have adapted perfectly to my environment through other means.
Okay. Okay, that
Where
makes sense.
our conclusion is really honing in on natural selection will not cause organisms to be perfect.
Okay. Okay, that makes more sense now. Yeah,
And
because when I seen will never, that's why I was just like,
oh,
this seems
so
too
strong,
strong.
right?
Yeah.
So
And I
strong.
was like, and then I was thinking that ecologist once did, and then the will eventually. I was like, I don't think that both of those would correlate to will never. But that I see now why it makes more sense.
Yeah, if you translate it into what it actually means. And then let's go back. I actually thought that D was a tricky wrong answer as well.
Yeah.
And it's
Does
just
it
going back to where we're not, it doesn't bring in natural selection at all.
no individual can be perfectly adapted to its environment. Okay, so natural selection would be like without bringing in natural selection, that's where this would be kind of out of scope then.
Yeah, because it's saying that like because our environments, vary, you can never perfectly adapt to it.
Mhm.
It's kind of wrong for the same reason that A is wrong, where it's just talking about perfectly adapting to our environment. And it's not talking about like our conclusion is it's wrong to think that natural selection will cause organisms to adapt perfectly. So we're saying our conclusion is natural selection will never allow organisms to be perfectly adapted.
Actually, never. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that makes more sense why D is wrong.
And if we think, I mean, honestly, then how do you choose between it? Let's say, like, if you were narrowing it down and you had A and D left, how could you choose between the two of them?
It is not possible for an individual to be perfectly adapted to this environment because an individual can vary tremendously. No individual can. Oh yeah, because they're the same thing. Except D just adds in because an individual's environment can vary tremendously.
Exactly. It's like it doesn't
Oh,
reflect, it restates something that, and also D is part of our premise, right? So we're saying like D is our premise where it says, for an individual's environment can vary tremendously. It's not possible for us to do it. Like all of this is supporting our main conclusion too.
okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, because I went with A for this because I'm looking at my answers now. I went with it, but I see now why it makes more sense why like A and D are just so similar to one another.
Excellent.
Okay, perfect.